Hello there, kia ora. I've had a few people reach out to me this week and ask about different ways that they can keep their communities informed about this year's local body elections, which is awesome. The more people who vote, after all, the better our democracy is, and the more likely the outcomes are going to lead to better representation around those decision-making tables. So I thought I'd go through a few of the different ways that you might be able to get the word out to your communities and a few of the rules around messaging, because people often get this kind of muddled up in knowledge is power. The first thing that we're going to look at is signs, those big old billboards that you can put up on your fence for candidates that you support. Every district, though, has rules around things like the size of the signs and if they can be attached directly to a fence or need a little stand built for them. Your council website should have all these rules available, very easy to find on their page. The big area that seems to get confusing here is with rental properties. Can a tenant or a landlord put up a sign on a fence without permission from the other? So, from a legal perspective, this can actually get a little complicated. Election signs are not covered under quiet enjoyment laws because it might impact the neighbours. They might not like the sign that you're putting up, for example. From a legal perspective, a tenant or a landlord needs to give 21 days notice to the other party if they plan to put up a sign on a fence line on the property. And if there's anything in the tenancy agreement about signs, that supersedes the notice period. And some local councils also have rules on the issue as well because it falls into property rights laws. So you don't want to fall foul of these laws or your landlord. It's probably best to check first. Now, honestly, the vast majority of landlords are actually pretty reasonable on the topic since this is a temporary fixture, but it's safest not to assume that that's the case. The next area I get asked about a lot is social media. Candidates need to have authorization statements on promotional materials, but if they're responding to questions online or posting images from an event, ending every message with authorized by blah, 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 it's boring and redundant. A candidate can get around this by actually having their authorization statement in their social media description. This also means that candidates' posts into community groups need to be public, not anonymous, because anonymous electioneering directly from a candidate is, against the rules. Even if a candidate is using a personal page to post content, it still represents the candidate in some identifiable way. If you run a community group, it might be best to make sure that these rules are clear to members if you're looking at letting local politicians comment on your pages. And finally, a Meet the Candidates event. If you're looking at holding one of these things, that's brilliant. But it won't be fast, all right? Everyone is super busy at the moment. Candidates are off doing all sorts of stuff. So you need to plan ahead as much as possible. Try and find a format that's going to work best for your community group. That might be a traditional panel type thing or maybe something like speed dating. Explore your options here. Make sure you have an MC as well for the event to help keep time. A mix of a lot of candidates and a lot of details without someone with an eye on the time can lead to some really long, very dry events. Also, side note here, you might want to avoid opening the floor to questions as well. These events can actually end up being loaded by supporters of specific candidates. In fact, Voices for Freedom even suggested this as a strategy to their members to make them look more popular than they actually are. Those people who fill out the crowds, they ask patsy questions to their preferred candidate. If you want audience questions, get the audience to write them down in advance so you can make sure that there's no double ups on questions and you can filter through anything particularly problematic. Also, don't underestimate the power of simply talking to people. Ask them if they've thought about voting or if their papers have arrived or if they've got a preferred candidate. Because local elections are done by postal ballot, there's a huge amount of people who simply fall through the cracks when it comes to voting. The forms end up, on the fridge or buried under a pile of stuff on the table and they get forgotten and then it's too late. So encouraging people to vote is never a bad thing. And there's so many ways that we can do that on a small personal scale or to the wider community. Every vote is important, and the more of them that there are, the better that we end up as communities. Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along. We deal with these guys for the rest of the year.